Now I'm joined by Céline Sciamma, writer and director of Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It's a French historical romantic drama set in 18th century France, and the film is being released by Neon, who also put out our Best Picture winner, Parasite. And actually, it's funny, Sciamma was sort of rolling with the Neon crew on Oscars night, and so she was in a lot of photos with them. She was seen at their Neon party and after party. And unfortunately, we recorded our interview before the Academy Awards, so we didn't get a chance to ask her what it was like to be there for that. But she really is one of those sort of most exciting cinema minds, I think, to emerge from France in the last few years. And this is a very exciting conversation. Céline, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And now the film, it won the Screenplay Prize at Cannes when it premiered there last year. And since then, it's gone on to be nominated for a Golden Globe, a Spirit Award, a BAFTA Award, multiple nominations with the French Lumière Awards. Can you describe the movie to me? Like, how do you tell people what the story of the movie is?
Well, quite simply, I like to pitch it as a movie dedicated to love, how love is born, and also the memory of a love story. It's a love dialogue through time and space. And it's also a love dialogue that is a creative dialogue.
One of the things I find so remarkable about the movie is that it is both this simple, contained love story about these two women falling in love over a very small period of time. And yet at the same time, the movie is about women's place in society, the role of art, who gets to depict certain stories. Was it a challenge for you in writing the movie to sort of have it working on both those levels as like this very intimate story and also having these really big topics in there too?
Yeah, it was a real challenge, and that's why it took me so long to actually write it. I dreamt about it a lot, and it took me a long time buffering the film because it has many levels and there's a lot of layers. But that kind of challenge, I see it as a strong opportunity. I really see it as harvesting simple ideas to the max, being very playful. So you have to be patient to be playful in a way, not giving everything right away. And that implies the writing process, but also the shooting, I must say. You have to stick to your plan, resist the urge to go fast and to believe absolutely in the delay in every scene as a unit. Because the film is 2 hours long, but there's not a lot of scenes. It's 69 scenes, which is not a lot at all. It's about sticking to your plan, believing in delay, believing in the tools of cinema and the pleasure of taking your time.
Now, in the time since the movie premiered last year at Cannes, have your feelings about it changed? Like, are you looking at the movie or thinking about the movie differently now than you were a year ago?
Well, yes, because not about the movie itself. The reception of the film, of course, makes you think. And also, you see, especially because the film has this privilege of being released in a lot of countries. And I've done 14 releases of the film all over Europe. And now here, you feel seen also. You know, the film is about that. It's about how the artist looks at the world, at the character, but it's also how you look at the artist. So you learn a lot from the way people look at the film and look at you.
That's fascinating to me that part of what the movie is itself about is something that's continued on even as you've been kind of going through the release of the movie.
Yeah, that's one of the layers, I must say, and it's part of the experience. And that's something you can't anticipate. So it's a strong emotional journey promoting a portrait. I never get bored. It never gets mechanical because you meet the audience and you see the audience meeting the film. And that's something I find really beautiful.
And now your first 3 films have now come to be seen as a kind of a trilogy on teenage coming of age. And then there was 5 years from your previous film, Girlhood, now to Portrait. Do you feel like Portrait of a Lady on Fire is something new for you? Did it feel like you were sort of resetting yourself in some way as you were making this movie?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted it that way. The idea that the first 3 films were kind of a trilogy definitely is an idea that I handed the press to get closure in a way, and also to put myself in that challenging position where I will have to, reset, reboot. But also with very simple ideas behind this. I wanted to tell a story with grown-ups. I wanted to work with professional actresses, and also really wanted to talk about love, a love that would be fully lived. Whereas in my previous film, there was always a love interest. There was always a strong rise of desire, but it was mostly about discovering yourself. And I wanted that new interaction where it would be about discovering somebody else, discovering the other.
Your previous films have all been so strongly about now, such strong contemporary films. What was it like in making the transition to doing a period film with Portrait? I mean, if nothing else, your other films, you yourself had done the costumes, and that was something you kind of just couldn't do on this film. Mm-hmm. Was that something difficult for you to give up?
Not at all. I really wanted that. And it's not because you collaborate that you give up, actually. You could see it the opposite way around. You could say, well, since I'm going to be collaborating, for instance, on this costume design thing, I'm going to learn more about this craft, and maybe I can reach higher level of intervention because you're working hand in hand with somebody who's specialist, and you can have even more accurate ideas and demands. And this, I don't have a particular taste for period pieces. I didn't went through this thinking, oh, I'm gonna do a genre film. Really saw it as the same job, because cinema is always a reconstitution. It's either a reconstitution of the contemporary world, and a period piece is about a reconstitution of the past. So it has the same job with a higher level of intervention. And also really with this challenge that because it was set in the past, it would have to be the most contemporary object. Really also relying on the fact that since this story hasn't been told much, it definitely belonged to the present.
And so how did you do that? How did you make this period movie feel so contemporary, feel so alive?
I tried to think of each film as a prototype. My biggest fear is that, and especially with the period piece, you can think, oh, it's going to be more bourgeois, there'll be more money involved and everything, which is true. My film, production-wise, it's only 4 million euros, the average budget of a French film. So I really tried to keep my freedom, to be able to not compromise and to be radical. That's also why I think a lot about production when I write, so that I don't get submerged by challenges that are not interesting or that could get in the way of being radical. As I grow as a filmmaker, I think more and more that being radical is being generous.
How do you mean?
Radicality, for instance, is like the cut between two scenes. Yeah, how do you go from one scene to another in a way that is surprising? And it's generous because if it's new, it's generous because you put the audience in a position where they can get surprised. And I think, there can be a lot of surprise in radicality.
I've heard you say that you were sort of inspired by the idea of wanting to sort of like depict desire, to show desire in this movie. When you sit down to write, where do you start with that? Like, how do you take that sort of large and abstract idea and get to something concrete like the story of the movie?
Well, in a very simple way. Yeah, I wanted to film desire because I think it's something we rarely do because of that strong convention that we love, of love at first sight. That's the romance convention. Two beautiful people meet and you totally agree with the fact that they're going to love each other. And I wanted to show the rise of desire. So it means thinking about the different steps and not being afraid of taking your time, thinking that delay and frustration are a good tension. For instance, they kiss after, I don't know if I should say that, but they kissed for like an hour and 20 minutes. And this could look weird, but I think it embodies also something we love in our own love stories. Like when you remember a first kiss, you remember what led to that first kiss. And I really wanted to embody with the tools of cinema what it's like to fall in love and to have the audience engaged in that process with of course, their mind, but also with their bodies, to go through this experience of falling in love, like when two lovers recollect how it happened. And so it means, believing a lot in cinema and believing also in the viewer as somebody active and engaged in the film.
I know I don't quite know how to put this. The movie is not explicit, but it is very sexy. There's something, it's as if the movie itself is really super turned on. Mm-hmm. And was that difficult? I mean, it's a tone and a charge that goes through the entire film. And how did you capture that?
I think by being really, really accurate. For instance, chemistry could seem like this magical thing. Chemistry has a lot to do with the casting process, for instance. I mean, not the casting process, but the casting itself. Two actresses that we pick together in the frame, something happens. I'm not about accident or magic. I think it's about being really accurate about the choreography within the frame. How does somebody walks towards somebody else? It's about how many steps it's going to take. And I'm all about that. I could tell Noémie Merlan when she would have to walk toward the Delanelle, you're going to do it in 5 or you're going to do it in 6. And if it's 6, it seems like balanced. If it's 5, it seems fragile. A lot of my answers are about rhythm, that is to say melody. It's believing in the sensuality. And that is something you craft. And that is something you craft all the way. For instance, the breathing, the fact that you breathe out or breathe in has a very, very different effect on the viewer. So it's about saying, to the actress at the right moment, breathe out or open your mouth. And so believing in strong detail and creating this tension around faces, because that's cinema. It's the appetite and the urge to see faces as landscapes and interaction as a dance.
You bring up the casting of the film, and Adèle Haenel is someone you've worked with before. Noémie Merlan is new to you as an actress. What were you looking for when you were trying to cast those two roles?
I was looking for a strong equality. That's something I've been looking for throughout the film since writing, trying to break the narrative of conflict that we are so used to, trying to break the idea that conflict and eroticism are linked. The fact that it's two women falling in love already departs from gender domination, but also in the writing, I also decided that there would be no intellectual domination. And it's an artist and a model, so there's always some kind of intellectual domination here. And also that we wouldn't be playing with social hierarchy, even though it exists. Regarding, for instance, the servant, the maid character, she's a maid, but we're not embodying the social class. When she's in the frame, she's a subject. She has a goal. She has a desire. She has something to say.
Well, I know you didn't rehearse with the actresses before shooting. And so in some ways, you didn't really know what they were going to be like together on screen until you had started shooting. What was it like to not know what was going to happen between these two women?
It was something we wanted. I really wanted them to meet on the set. And even I would meet, for instance, Noémie Merlan on the set. And as it's a love story, it's about two people meeting. It felt right. This tension of the unknown seems totally falling in love tension. What's going to happen? And, the set dynamic relied a lot on this idea that the film was also very metaphorical, as we are in the workshop of the painter who is trying to do this portrait, and we were trying to do this portrait in our own workshop. That was the same. It was very joyful to play with this mirroring situation. Very fun, I must say. And I think it's really important to make it fun. I like to work in that kind of mood.
Is it important for you as a filmmaker that you feel like there's a sense of discovery for you in making the movie, that you're not going in there just executing exactly what you know you want, but that you're sort of discovering something, finding something yourself in the process of making the movie?
Yes, of course. I'm being pretty accurate when I write about the scenes, which means by that I mean where they start and where they end. And this quite stays in the editing room, I must say. Most of the cuts, they are written. But within those units, each day before shooting, I was questioning my storyboarding and coming each day with new ideas. Some of the shots were written and stayed like that. But some of the shots really changed from one day to another, because go deep and deep into the shooting process. Your grammar is, you build the language of the film, and you become more and more accurate, and that means also more and more brave to try new things. So, for instance, there were more and more long takes as the days went by. Especially because as I knew that I was going to be in a reverse shot dynamic a lot because of the model and painter situation, I was looking for contrast in the scenes where they were not in that position. I mean, in my previous film, I did very, very few reverse shots. And I was engaged in the process of writing the film. I realized, okay, this has to be a film about reverse shot, for instance. But for all the scenes that weren't in the workshop, I was more free to invent another type of rhythm, choreography, and melody.
The idea of the female gaze is something that people have talked about a lot as they've been discussing the movie. Mm-hmm. And the two women in the movie do spend a lot of time looking at each other and even talking about looking at each other. Yeah. For you, what was it that you liked about taking this thematic idea and making it something explicit in the movie itself?
I didn't craft the film thinking it would be a manifesto for the female gaze, but I kind of like the fact, I totally like the fact that it's been looked at that way. You know, politics, sometimes when people want to reduce our work, and when I say our, I think about women directors, they kind of say, oh, there's a message, or it's political. Like in the end, we would do cinema to actually embody ideas. You know, that it wouldn't be for the sake of art, but for some kind of activism. I am an activist, and I am an activist as a citizen. I am an activist. When I make a film, I'm also an activist for cinema. And politics are at the root of the film. And you turn them into art. But then there's politics in the end also, in the way people look at the film. And I find that quite beautiful, I must say. And I'm totally aware that I'm bringing out on the screen new imaginaries, a new power dynamic. I am also totally aware that this is great opportunity for art, fiction, a great opportunity for audience to have new emotional rides, new perspective on cinema. And also, I hope, for writers and directors feeling legitimate to tell their stories.
Because the question of both who gets to tell stories in art and what are those stories that are being depicted, mm-hmm. and then as well, what are all the stories that we have not seen mm-hmm. as audiences because of who's making those decisions? These, again, are things that are explicitly dealt with in the movie. Mm-hmm. And is it exciting for you to have the movie engaging with those issues in particular?
It is very exciting. And it is very exciting to see that people are excited by the ideas. I think, cinema is about having desire for ideas. And the fact that those ideas can create new desires, I think, is a very beautiful dynamic. And I'm not afraid of being labeled. Sometimes I'm being told, but don't you find it narrowing for you, for your work, that people would say it's a feminist film or would say it's a lesbian film? And my answer is that, it's narrowing if you think those imaginaries aren't powerful. And I think they are wide. I think they are strong opportunities for art. I think they are also strong political statements. I think ideas that have seduction and that I often despise. I think it's ideas that have a program that is dangerous. So I don't see it as something that would reduce my work or its consequences. We should totally be proud.
And now you are one of the founders of 50/50 by 2020, which mm-hmm. is a group working towards gender parity in the film industry. Is there a connection for you between that work that you do within the industry itself mm-hmm. and the work that you are presenting on screen?
Well, those things connect because I learn a lot from those struggles. Also, I'm very privileged in this industry. So connecting also with other directors, and being in a collective, experimenting, being political and being on the field makes you grow, makes you more aware, makes you more connected to new ideas. So I see it as something very nourishing for our work, and it's also influenced by the cultural moment we're living. And as I'm passionate about that moment, I read a lot. It's an intellectual process that makes you better, I think, because once more, cinema is about ideas. It's about ideas. So the more you get connected to new ideas, contemporary ideas, political awareness, new desires, the more also you have empathy. Being a director for me is all about it's about loving the present. Yeah, it's about loving the contemporary. So the more I connect to those kind of energies and ideas and collective, the more inspired I am.
Céline Sciamma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.